Hey, welcome back to Inside Gaming. Today we're reviewing the long-awaited Luigi's Mansion 3, a game that has been a long time coming. Don't talk to me about Dark Moon. I didn't have a 3DS.
How dare you?
I'm joined by Caden. We both played the game. Caden finished it. I'm mostly done, and today we're gonna tell you what we think about it. Caden, can you tell me about the intro a little bit?
The intro is pretty cute. Luigi, Mario, Peach, and the assortment of various colored toads are all going to a big hotel. They get there, and it turns out, hey, it's haunted. King Boo is back, and he's trying to kidnap everybody and finally get revenge on Luigi.
You walk in, all the ghosts are wearing people masks and clothes. I enjoyed it. Very tongue-in-cheek. It's pretty short, I would say 15 minutes. You wake up in the middle of the night. Nothing's happening anymore. It's all spooky. You end up getting the poltergust, which...
I actually had some issues with a poltergust.
Who's this?
I'm Steve. I'm a vacuum cleaner expert. Spent nearly 60 years fixing vacuum cleaners now. Very inaccurate in my opinion, vacuum-wise.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Anyway, Caden, let's talk about presentation and graphics.
So Luigi is the main character. So front and center, he is super expressive. He's so terrified, but as soon as you clear a room, he feels this moment of, I'm okay. And it's just really satisfying to have him be in a main character slot again. Really brings Luigi to a forefront as a character. But that overly emotional Luigi is completely offset by Luigi, who's just completely an emotionless husk.
Oh yeah, Luigi rules. And Luigi's awesome in this game because he's like an actual character. He has character traits. I couldn't tell you anything about Mario. I guess he's supposed to be cool. Luigi's actually super interesting. When he gets scared, he falls down and then he does this swoop back up and stands stiff as a board and walks around like that as you're controlling him, which I think is a really great touch. Something about the presentation in general I wanted to highlight is it doesn't feel very spooky, which I know I played the first game and I was a child and I'm an adult now who's not scared of anything. The first game, correct me if I'm wrong, was a little bit more eerie, right?
I actually replayed it, I think within the last year or so. It still retains its level of horror, both on the GameCube original version and on the 3DS remake. That concept of being a spooky game kind of got left by the wayside a long time ago.
This one's more, I would say more fun and more playful, which I think works for its benefit, but it makes me miss a little bit of the first one, and I guess Dark Moon. But they also, in leaving the spookiness behind, don't behold themselves to just a haunted mansion vibe, and the levels get really interesting.
Yeah, the levels are actually pretty varied. Probably my favorites are much later on as they start getting really wild with it, but those first couple floors feel very like a hotel. There's the basement floors, the lobby, the mezzanine, the hotel shops. And then as soon as you get past those rooms, it becomes a free-for-all for some of the weirdest concepts that you could have for a haunted hotel.
For me, when I got to the Ren Fair, like the medieval floor, I was like, whoa, this is not even a little bit normal, and that gives Nintendo a chance to like really lean into it.
But it does lose a little bit of itself in that central theming. It kind of would have been cool to have that full haunted hotel concept, but it's just more fun to have the varied concepts in there, I suppose.
It doesn't feel like a pirate or a museum themed hotel room. It just feels like those things above a hotel.
Exactly.
You mentioned that there were some levels that you feel like let you down. Do you want to go into what were the highlights? What were the low end of the levels?
Okay, so the Spectral Catch, which is floor 12, is probably my favorite floor. It's small, but it's well themed. It's very balanced. You used pretty much every mechanic, which is kind of unique. Most floors don't completely use everything. Twisted Suites, which is floor 11, I feel it's the best use of the game's mechanics. Has a really fun boss fight.
Is Twisted Suites the magic one?
Twisted Suites is the magic one.
I really liked that.
It was the first floor that I actually felt both encapsulated the concept of the hotel and had its own unique setting.
It felt like a themed hotel room, and not like just a pyramid.
He sucked up awful lot of money, which I thought was very unrealistic. I got a penny stuck in a Hoover back in '85. Nearly ruined the whole thing. What a terrible Christmas that was.
Thank you, Steve. Worst levels, Boiler Works. It's gimmicky. I hate the mechanic that they permeate throughout the entire thing. It feels like it ruins the flow and you only ever use it really once. Paranormal Productions, floor 8. Too many conflicting mechanics and it's just so obtuse.
That one had really fun ideas. I was excited to get there because I'd seen footage of the boss battle, which I thought was fun, but it all hinges on one really opaque, one single item that the game hasn't really taught you. You can take items through certain things.
Once I figured it out, it became just like, oh, I already figured out what I needed to do. I just needed to find this one item, and then it became a chore dragging everything around. It was okay, just it let me down. I did see a lot of the promotional material for it, and I was excited to get there, and then when I finally got there, I was disappointed.
In my opinion, I thought the boss fight on that one, which we'll talk more about bosses later, because this game really is, at its heart, a puzzle/boss fighting game.
Yeah,
right?
It's puzzle action, which is kind of cool.
Sometimes you'll end up really banging your head against something, and you're like, I must be puzzling this wrong, when in fact it's just one mechanic that you've forgotten about because it's actually not used that often. As the game goes on and you get into those situations, it'll eventually train you to be like, oh, I have to use the dark light, or oh, I need to take this item here. But I wouldn't call it a steep learning curve so much as kind of like a wall that you have to really just clamber up and get over.
Finding out how to beat each boss is pretty balanced, and even if you die, it's not too punishing. It just restarts you. So you'll have moments to actually be like, okay, what am I doing wrong in this situation before dying? And they're pretty generous with health as well. And then each room has their own little secrets. So again, you use the little dark flashlight, and then there's hidden gems and items on each floor, tons of money to collect. And then there's the boo hunt, which returns, which is pretty fun, sometimes a little frustrating, but it ends up being a whole experience in and of itself. And it really makes those puzzles work.
I think if I were to sum up generally the game, is it can be very frustrating, but it does not stay frustrating for long. There were bosses where I would be like, the first time I run it, I would get really annoyed and I'd be like, why can't I stop this attack? Why am I dying? And then I would start over. And the second time would be a breeze. Like, it does do a good job of teaching you. I mean, Luigi's Mansion 3 is not Dark Souls, but when you go back against the boss, if you've learned, you'll benefit. I guess the frustration is part of it, but sometimes it felt a little bit unbalanced.
Okay, so this leads us into controls. How did you feel about them?
At first, I wasn't crazy about it because that is a learning curve, because you want it to control like an FPS, or I did at least, and it doesn't. Aiming with the right stick is really squishy. You'll try to aim at something and you'll push too far, or you'll push not enough, and then if you don't realize that the gyroscope control's on, he'll just be tilting up and down while you move your controller, which, thanks Nintendo, everyone's really still asking for motion controls.
The motion controls aren't that bad, it just doesn't feel well utilized.
I wish they would just like say like in the beginning, like, hey, do you want these on? That's not a huge issue in the game, by the way. I'm highlighting that too much just because I like complaining. The controls were weird for me, but when I did get them down, I found them super satisfying. So like, if you walk around with the left stick, that's way better at orienting yourself and pointing your light and your vacuum towards things you want to interact with.
I completely agree. The controls aren't bad, they just feel a little stiff, which also kind of like lends into what you can actually do in the game. There's a lot of different abilities, and some of them stack on top of each other. L is the suction cup and R is your flashlight, but if you press L and R at the same time, you're supposed to activate the dark light. So if you press both of them just out of sync, you're going to use one or two of the items rather than actually using the dark light.
I didn't know that the plunger and the strobe light were on the shoulder buttons until like halfway through the game.
Besides that, there's a bunch of stuff that's returning, and then there's some stuff that's new to this one. You know, you have sucking and blowing in the flashlight from Luigi's Mansion 1, and then Luigi from the 3DS remake, which is returning. The strobe bulb, the dark light from Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, and then there's the suction shot, which is new. Burst, which is a thing. I didn't really use it that much, which kind of made me disappointed. It's very context sensitive.
Is the burst function supposed to be funny? A malfunction like that can seriously harm even the most experienced vacuum operators. I lost my partner when he was...
Yes, thank you, Steve. I do want to say that the slam mechanic is new, Caden.
Yeah, it's fairly new. It's just, it works really well, but it also takes away a little bit of the skill of, you know, trying to get 100% pull on a particular ghost from the original Luigi's Mansion. But it works at making things not feel like it's taking too long. Also, while we're still talking about controls, Screaming Mario is set to the D-pad.
Mario, Mario, Mario.
Mario. And the read changes if Luigi's scared.
Yes.
He goes, Mario. I definitely miss the kind of skill of pulling back away from the ghosts, but I think in introducing the slam technique, it introduces a new level of skill that you have to work at. You know, you can take out multiple ghosts now by slamming them into each other. It's not about taking out one ghost so much as it's about taking out a room of ghosts, which I think is a really great play in making a sequel, because obviously you don't want to make the same game, but it doesn't fully take away from the old skills. And while I am talking about using all the skills, there's one simple thing that this game gets very, very right, and that is understanding the benefits of letting me enter a room and f up every single inch of it, and then giving me lots of shiny, shiny coins for doing so. The Lego games are great with this, like, you know how you walk in and whether you're playing Lego Indiana Jones or Harry Potter or Star Wars or whatever, you just walk in and obliterate every interactable item in the room.
That actually helps you actually find a lot of the like hidden gems and all the boos in the game too. So, and that's the best part of the game, is being able to interact with almost anything and find out that, oh, this is going to lead me to a new puzzle.
Yeah, and Next Level Games knows how fun it is to use those controls, so they don't really have to put too many incentives in front of the player because they know that you're gonna walk in and you're gonna want to use the poltergust. Real quick before we talk about more gameplay stuff, did you play it docked? Did you play it undocked?
I played it docked for most of it, but I did play a little bit in handheld, and docked felt a little bit better. I liked playing with the Pro controller, but for motion controls, undocked Joy-Cons, not connected to that little grip controller, actually felt pretty good.
9 times out of 10, just give me a Pro controller. I don't want to play the Switch undocked. But I played it undocked, and it looks fine. It plays great. No technical performance issues with undocked.
I did find myself glitching into walls sometimes, but luckily the burst actually frees you from like a stasis movement section, so you can boost out of it, but it's not that big of a deal. You can also just reset, and it auto-saves pretty frequently.
So if glitches are kind of the gamer's enemy, bear with me, let's talk about Luigi's enemies, which is the bosses, which is an enormous part of Luigi's Mansion 3. The bosses are probably one of the most key gameplay features.
The first couple floors, they're pretty standard, but once, like we said, you get past that halfway point, they're actually really interesting.
They did a really good job of not only making the controls and the puzzles of each boss feel different, but also they introduce them in different ways. Maybe you'll play a boss at the very beginning, maybe you'll play a boss at the end of a level, and then another one will pop up immediately, which kind of draws out being on one level in one case, which I didn't like very much. Talking about the Polter Kitty.
It overstays its welcome. It's one of the few instances that it comes back and it's just frustrating that you're finally making some good progress and they rip you back down to previous floors to explore rooms you've been in countless times.
Yeah, it's not very fun to retread your steps. I did play co-op, and the co-op is really good. Nintendo does that kind of like asymmetrical thing where you can play as the Hat, or you can just play as a pointer in Mario Galaxy. This is one of the most even-feeling couch co-op experiences I've played in a while.
Yeah, it does make things significantly easier. Specific bosses just become trivial when you're playing co-op, but I think that that's the point, honestly.
Yeah, because this game can be challenging.
Yep, and if you're playing it by yourself, having to manage both characters at the same time can be difficult sometimes.
I didn't play any of the multiplayer. You did?
Yes. So there's Scream Park, which is a collection of 3 mini games. They feel very Mario Party-esque. There's coin floating. You collect coins to avoid bombs in a little pool while you're in a floaty. It's actually kind of fun, if not a little bit chaotic. Then there's Ghost Hunt, which is exactly what it sounds like. Cannon Barrage is weird, but I liked it the most. You load cannonballs into a cannon and then you shoot targets. Most points win. It's kind of a cat and mouse game between, are you going to wait for your opponent to beat a ghost and then steal their cannonball away, or are you just going to defeat your own and just try and rack up points as quickly as possible?
That kind of reminds me of Killer Queen.
Yeah, absolutely. They also brought in Scarescraper, which is the final multiplayer mode, which returns from Dark Moon. Local works better because Nintendo still doesn't understand what the hell talking online to other players means and how important that is. Every 5 floor, there's a rare boss ghost. So if you're wondering why you're missing a bunch of ghosts in the main campaign, that's where they're coming from. It's the thing that's going to keep you coming back. Plus, apparently Nintendo says there's going to be DLC for these sections of the game. Don't know about anything coming to the main campaign though.
Well, good on you, Nintendo, for thinking about longevity of the game, because it's probably going to be like 15 years before we get another game featuring Luigi like this.
Now, Luigi, is it? We don't see that young man empty his vacuum cleaner once, but he's sucking up food, clothes, plates, rats, for goodness sakes. And don't even get me started on the state of his filter.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Before we talk about final thoughts and any criticisms we have, we do need to talk about music real quick. Caden, I'll let you take that.
The soundtrack is legit. One of the best years for video game music. While not every floor actually has a traditionally spooky theme in its actual setting, the music totally makes up for it by being actually like spooky and scary and still fitting into the theme of the floor itself. Like you go to the pirate floor and it sounds like spooky pirates. It's great. It's probably the second most important part of the game, right behind Luigi being scared and Luigi being a faceless void.
I feel good about this game. I like it. I do have a few criticisms. It can get really hand-holdy at points where like tutorials will pop up on the screen saying like, hey, why don't you do this? And you're like, oh, I actually want to go through the level and kind of like just check for collectibles and suck things up. And then the same message will keep popping up from the professor being like, hey, you might want to check this. Hey, why don't you go check this? Hey, I think you might want to go check this. And then other times when you're stuck in a puzzle and you forget a mechanic, there's no help to be found. So it's handheldy in the wrong ways. One tutorial popped up during a boss fight and obscured the fight I was doing. And another time I was fighting a ghost. And then after I did the thing I needed to do to get it, a tutorial popped up and said, hey, you might want to try this. You can't dismiss them, and it hampers sometimes what you can do gameplay wise if there's a tutorial up. So because the professor's tip had come up telling me what to do, the step in the ghost fight timed out and then it started the interaction over. I was like, cool, awesome, thank you for all the help you've given me, Professor. Oh, and the low life alert sound. Super annoying. It's like a constant heartbeat tone that goes faster as you get lower in health, and I know I'm running out of health, and it's louder by a huge margin than any music or sound in the game.
Yeah, I completely agree on those points. The pop-ups for every time you're a little confused about something seem to come up at the worst possible times or when you don't actually need them. You've already figured it out. It's just there's a difficult section ahead of you and it's assuming you don't know. There's some clunkiness to the controls, but you kind of get used to them as time goes on, which that's great and that's pretty common for most games. Some floors had some really issues with pacing, and then having to backtrack is definitely not fun in this game, which really disappoints me because the first game, again, was really fun to just explore around. This one, not so much. Once I'm done with the floor, I kind of want to go away and then not come back. But at the end, Luigi's Mansion 3 is pretty enjoyable all around. Its high notes greatly outweigh the low aggravating points, and it's never aggravating for too long. If you're looking for a solid puzzle adventure game, Luigi's Mansion 3 really wasn't that big of a disappointment. It was really a solid package.
However, the negatives are there, so keep that in mind that you might bump your head into some things that irritate you.
I would like to say, as a little side note, if you're a completionist, the rewards for doing everything, like catching all the boos and getting all the gems, they're amusing, but the actual aha moment of solving the puzzles was way more rewarding than the actual reward the game gives you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing, and I'm gonna try the multiplayer this weekend. Thank you for watching this review, and stay tuned to Inside Gaming for more news, reviews, and all kinds of stuff.
Ghosts are real, but I've never seen a vacuum work on one.
Stay spooky.
I think yes. I think they are comparable in wang size.
If he is slime and goo, he could obviously make it bigger or smaller, right?
Kind of the Mr. Fantastic question. I mean, being that he is a fluid creature, I'd have to assume that yes, but it would detract from, like, he'd have like little arms